Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Godzilla podcast. Alright, so this is going to be part 3 of the Godzilla 1985 live commentary. I'm including the link again to MetaCafe website that showcases the direct movie in its entirety. And if you're following me along now, I'm going to be on that link right at 39 minutes exactly. So please go to there. You'll find, for those of you doing on the VHS side, this is that part where Godzilla was just found. His dorsal fins were found emerging and then submerging within the waters by that helicopter guy. And then now there's a press conference happening. So again, 39 minutes, and I'll go ahead and I'll start now. So now the press conference is being held, and of course now there's a wide shot showcasing everyone in terms of the giant TV monitor being informed. What's funny too is that a lot of those people, I saw some of them, they can't help but smile. Essentially, that's what's happening. I guess the people that were there probably were just literally found on the street whenever the scene was being shot, and they were asked if they probably wanted to be within a Godzilla film, and they did. And then some of them were smiling during that shot too. Now we see the pandemonium that a Godzilla sighting and a pending visit will have, with all the troops and military personnel, all of them gathering together, running around, supplies being shipped, dropped here and there. The people themselves causing huge traffic jams within, let's say, the highways and the infrastructures too. So great stuff. At this point too, it looks like the charges are being set within the volcano too. And even though it's still not I guess like a final confirmation in terms of the way that the Godzilla is going to be defeated, at least within the context of this film, they're still doing it as an early precaution. I love those particular scenes, classics. Anytime that you have a Godzilla movie, you have to have people running in one direction all together in mass. The Lost World movie even had dedication to it. There's a prominent scene when the T-Rex is rampaging through, was it San Francisco or San Diego? I can't remember. But there's a great shot where it showcases people running in Pandemonium down the street from the T-Rex, and it shows a group of foreigners, of Asians, running as well. And when that happens, it instantly mimics and halts back to the classic shots that we see of the Godzilla films. The military too, here within this film, they're resorting to the only thing that they can, which is in this case conventional warfare. What a huge surprise it was later on whenever there was going to be the introduction of the Super X. Now we have the very first time that Godzilla, it looks like his presence is being monitored near the bay, near the harbor. Everyone knows that he's coming soon, and when that happens, everyone is on full alert. The helicopter that was just showcased too, it has one of the most prominent surprise scenes, I guess, of Godzilla emerging. I remember it scaring me as a kid. It's going to be coming up soon, but it's the shot whenever the guy is looking over the waters, and then all of a sudden Godzilla's head rises and meets him straight face to face, eye to eye. What a sight that would be. You could not have any more of a way to turn your hair white in terms of shock than seeing something like that rise out of the sea right in front of you and then stare directly straight to you. Here we go. The At 42 minutes 44 seconds, Godzilla's face rises directly in front of the helicopter. Those guys, of course, are in for the shock of their lives. And then finally, it is on. We have the full-blown 100% military versus Godzilla in all its entirety. Fantastic stuff. Seeing all of this is so wonderful because it's still, I mean, obviously it looks like it's miniatures, but You can tell that the special effects team went all out when it came to this. I mean, there are some great looking shots. It looks like of the fighter jets in formation, shooting one by one. The explosives too, bouncing off essentially off of Godzilla's hard body. The trade paperback, by the way, states on these scenes that whenever Godzilla is being hit, either by, let's say, the machine gun shells, or in this case by the bombs, that his skin is actually even tougher than diamond. That's why he has no weaknesses when it comes to this type of warfare. Everything as far as these direct shots, they do nothing to him. Lots of great scenes too of the Cybot in full action. Basically, if you're seeing a extreme close-up of Godzilla, that is him. Like, that's the Cybot. And in some cases, we're talking about the facial shots, but in other cases where it's like, let's say, chest high, then it looks like the man in suit, the classic man in suit. I did love that scene too, whenever Godzilla basically rams his head back into the sea. You can just imagine the full force, the power of that. Here he is now jumping right back out into the harbor. All the tanks, everyone there, all ready for him, and they all start firing in unison. Of course, none of it doing any kind of damage to Godzilla. But we're coming up very soon to one of my most favorite scenes ever in all of my Godzilla films. It's the one where he, in one single successive shot, uses his radioactive breath to take out, in this case, the road tanks going from right straight to left. Now he's come across, in this case, the giant ship, the one harboring, I guess, the secret illegal operation from the Russians. And one of my favorite scenes is this one, where the guys are running around in Pandemonium on the ship, and then in the far background you see Godzilla walking across. Not really paying attention to it, but still, it's a classic case of, in this case, force of nature, the way that he works, because he single-handedly, his movements cause the entire ship to ram against the harbor bay. And with it, it causes the damage of, in this case, the missile system, and the way that it inevitably sets loose the Soviet location. Now, finally, we have the classic fire breath, the atomic radioactive breath, firing one by one, taking out those tanks straight from right to left. Just what a fantastic job. I was hoping so much that there was going to be something like this within the Godzilla 2014 film, but alas, there was not. Now he's surveying his entire, I guess, conquest, roaring in triumph at this jest, I guess, whatever they had in terms of their attempts to defeat him. And then, of course, basically nothing could be done in terms of stopping him right then and there. It goes now to the inside of that Russian harbor boat, whatever that is. What's interesting to know, a lot of you know this already, but for some of you that don't, in the 1985 film, it showcases the Russian purposely trying to launch the missile. But in every other version, including the Godzilla trade paperback, it focuses on him trying to stop the missile from accidentally being sent out. So it goes to show again the political context of the US version, portraying the Russians as, I guess you call it, as trigger happy and wanting to launch the nuclear missile on its own, while in every other version they're trying to valiantly and bravely, the guy trying to stop it, I guess, before his final breath comes across. But at least for the US version, that's what we get here. Godzilla has finally reached Tokyo, and we're going to get many fantastic looking shots of him walking across through Tokyo. Alas, one of the most coveted deleted shots that I wish was in the film was the one where he comes across, in this case, a skyscraper made completely out of glass, and then when that happens, he stops. He sees his own reflection. It's the very first time in his own existence, based on circumstances, that he's ever seen his own reflection. Think about it. I mean, he's a giant monster, probably from some volcano, from some island, who knows for how long. In all of his existence, he's never seen his own reflection, not even in water. Here he is looking at himself, and for like 30 seconds, he can't recognize himself, or he is recognizing himself and is trying to gauge it in. I wish that was left within the film. Now we're at the, I guess, one of the most horrible scenes within the film, and that's when Godzilla just shot down the helicopter, which landed on a row of parked cars. I guess you call them parked, but in this case, it's the traffic being jammed, and with it, it causes a multiple chain reaction of explosions. But nowadays, watching this, it made me realize just how horrific this scene was, because hundreds of people literally died just within that one single chain reaction. Now, in one of the best scenes too, it showcases Godzilla coming across that freight train or that subway train, showcasing the people. And this is a more intimate look at his, I guess, devilish ways, because he purposely picks up this thing, looks inside the freight train itself, the subway train, sees that there are people there. I mean, and all the other instances, you can kind of say that Godzilla had no idea what his actions were doing to the people. Here, in this case, he sees them, and still he nonchalantly just discards this thing, killing them, and then probably stepping over or stepping on the rest of the people within the train too. So absolutely, this is a hallmark in terms of bringing Godzilla back to his evil ways. I think that's probably the clearest scene within the whole film that showcases that Godzilla knows what his action is doing. I guess in a lot of ways, it was definitely toned down within the rest of the movies afterward, but in this case, this was probably as bad as it gets when it comes to the world of Godzilla. Now we've been probably about a minute into the U.S. side, where Raymond Burr and some of the other military personnel are talking about and basically doing nothing. They can't do anything other than watch about what's happening within Tokyo because of Godzilla. That line just passed about a minute ago too, about the urban pacification, the one I was telling you earlier, that I believe it was the only line left over from the much more comedic route that the original Godzilla 1985 script had, that it was going to be almost an all-out comedy, but thankfully and luckily a lot of people were able to decide otherwise, the people that were making this film, and change it to the beautiful film that it is today. Alright, so if you're following me now, I should be at 50 minutes, almost at 51 minutes exactly. And we're at the scene where the scientists, the older scientists, and the journalists are watching as pretty much they could do nothing other than Godzilla walking around Tokyo. There's those wonderful, wonderful looking shots that showcase actual buildings from Tokyo with, in this case, Godzilla in the background. I wish, again, as I mentioned earlier, that there was this stuff more prominently featured within the Godzilla films. Here's the wonderful, fantastic looking scene where Godzilla is coming across, I guess, the war room on the Japanese side, and his footsteps are shaking everything. And I had mentioned that there's going to be a scene very similar to it within, it looks like, the upcoming Cloverfield Lane, the 10 Cloverfield Lane film, where the giant monster, whatever it is coming across their bunker, shaking it enough so much that everything, even underneath, however far number of feet it is underneath, it's still rattling everything underneath. The miniatures, by the way, from the film, you'll see were fantastic. I mean, it's almost like half a block, let's say, of miniatures. It's no expense was spared when it came to these miniatures. Nowadays, I mean, up until that Godzilla Final Wars, the miniatures there looked obviously like very fake. But in this one, at least they tried to see and make sure that even from, I guess, close-up shots to some of the longer away shots, that it looked like it was somewhat manageable city, like it looked like a city. This homeless guy, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember reading something, a link with regards to this, he apparently was a prominent actor. Someone may have to correct me on this, but it was like he would be the equivalent of, let's say, him coming across as an actor. I'm just going to throw him a name out. Like, let's say somebody as big as Jim Carrey suddenly being in a Godzilla film. And I think that's what it was here. That's why his minute as a cameo seems to be just out of the blue, him coming in and then coming out. Obviously, he just was confronted by Godzilla face to face. This next other scene really scares me too when I was a kid. It's the idea that they're facing and fighting Godzilla, the scientists, with that pulse or whatever that thing is that's coming out of the camera. They're going to use it to try to distract them. It stops Godzilla, but then, to their other horror, he turns around and then faces them directly. Oh my goodness, I remember thinking as a kid that this was one of the most horrible things ever. You wanted his attention, you definitely got it. And then, well, I mean, what were they thinking? What did they think was going to happen when something like this, when you have like Godzilla coming across and you have a device that'll catch his attention? There's nothing else that can happen except sheer terror. In this case, him toppling that building down just to be on the safe side. So what a fantastic looking scene whenever Godzilla stops midway, slowly but surely turns around, and then when that happens, it's bye-bye. Only but for the fact that there was that lucky shot from, I guess, that laser cannon of sorts that distracted Godzilla back, then these three people would have been absolutely just dead in water. And a bit of a plot hole device too. I never quite understood why they were trying to go up like these people, because you would think that with so many exits that they could simply just walk around, find another place, and then go down more safer to the ground away from Godzilla. But for whatever reason, they had to go up. Obviously, maybe it had to do with the fact that they were trying to get on that helicopter, the one that they were trying to rescue them. But the helicopter could pick them up, I guess, more discreetly somewhere else, especially further away. And the way for them to do that is to get on the ground first, probably walk away a couple of blocks, and then the helicopter picked them up. So, bit of a plot hole, even to this day. I always wondered why they were trying to get up to the roof and only finding that area blocked and then spending so many scenes trying to break through that metal door when they could have, I guess, just easily found someplace else, like another part of the building to come downward and then get to the ground and then escape elsewhere. Finally, 55 minutes, 22 seconds in, we had the glorious debut of the Super X. By far, with the fanfare, especially that wonderful music, memorable music. That music was done, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere by Christopher Young, but I don't know if he just did the US version of the music and it's different in Japanese, in Japan. But the Super X makes its debut with that glorious fanfare of sorts, that Liet motif as it's called. And when it does so, it's taking on Godzilla himself 100%. Think about that within the context of all the Godzilla films. For the first time, you have a machine, in this case, trying to take on Godzilla. You have so many others that have tried, let's say, conventional military warfare. Obviously, no chance. Here you have a machine that survives not only Godzilla's atomic breath, but is able to dodge his attacks and then takes him out within a few swipes. That's how powerful to me the Super X was when I was a kid, and is to this day. I constantly cited the original Super X as one of my favorite, absolute favorite villains, if you could call it, within all the Godzilla films. The only reason why it was defeated was by pure happen chance. That electrical storm that came, I guess, from the nuclear fallout happened to take out its instruments. And if it weren't for that, then it definitely would have defeated Godzilla again. And it shows to show that the whatever coating it had within its outer shell was able to easily stop the radioactive breath of Godzilla. Previously, in all the other films, his radioactive breath was always like the final kiss of death. Nothing could withstand it, but here, the Super X could. Now here's another new notion introduced within the film. Like I mentioned in some of the earlier minutes, the notion of Godzilla tapping into radiation, the birds essentially becoming a part of Godzilla. Here's another new notion. In this case, it's those cadmium missiles being used as a very clever way to defeat Godzilla. Not a single military shot like from the Super X. Instead, it's just using brains over brawn and making sure that Godzilla is distracted as he would be, again in a realistic manner, when we're talking about a big animal of sorts just acting on pure animal instinct. you fire something up in the air, especially all bright and shiny and sparkly, it would absolutely distract Godzilla. I don't know necessarily about his mouth being open, but it would leave him in that weakened state, and then boom, the cadmium missiles drop into his mouth, the only entrance viable within his body to have something go in. And when that happens, then he's taken out. He falls and he crashes into one of the most iconic looking shots within the film. It's him crashing into that building and almost caving it in, but resting in it quite peacefully afterward. So the Dark Horse comic beautifully portrays that scene as well as the iconic shot that it is. By the way, the composer Christopher Young, most recently he did Spider-Man 3, a couple of years back. I followed some of his work after that, but that's one of his more prominent roles too. Back to the Russians, in this case in that secret ship of theirs, and it showcases that the missile, whenever you have everything, let's say, being awesome, it's a happy ending, then it comes back to this reality, the fact that somehow, some way, the Soviet missile is still launched. Obviously, again on the U.S. version, it was the guy purposely launching it, but in the Japanese version and everywhere else, I believe he was able to stop it, but somehow it was still malfunctioning. Like with his last breath, he stopped it, but the way that the ship slammed into the harbor so hard, it messed up all of the mechanics, and it still caused the clock to count down. And when that happened, then that's when it launched still straight to Japan. It sets up, though, a very, I guess, great moment whenever you have a tense situation. You have one missile trying to find another missile and then pinpoint it together so that way they can crash or basically explode each other. Think of that, I guess, happening out in space, how hard that would be. But it's a great tense moment that's coming up later on. Alright, so this would be a great time to go ahead and stop, which should be just at 1 hour and about a couple of seconds. So go ahead and stop it here, and then I'll continue this within part 4. And this should be the moment where Godzilla is just resting within, quite peacefully again, within that building as the older scientist is looking on and discussing what has occurred. Alright, thanks again everybody. Take care.